Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hope my voice holds up. I'm told the only time a candidate's voice does not fade out is if he's not working hard. I am working hard. Is the Washington Post here? Just want to know, just a quick question before I get started. Where's Bob Woodward? Made his bones off Watergate. If they had had one sliver of dirt on Nixon that they have on Joe Biden, their heads would explode. But I haven't heard a word from Bob Woodward, haven't heard a word from Carl Bernstein. Where are they? Where are they? Washington Post has not endorsed a Republican president ever, ever. Really? Jimmy Carter over Ronald Reagan? Michael Dukakis over George Herbert Walker Bush? Joe Biden over Trump? Okay, now that that's off my chest, thank you all for having me. I really do appreciate it. Here's the deal. Between now and August 21st, that's 2 days before the first debate, I've got to raise 40,000 individual donations. Donation from 40,000 individuals. The donation can be as small as $1. Now, I know all of you have at least collectively 40,000 friends. So call your friends, tell them, get Elder up there on the debate stage. Even if you want somebody other than Elder to be nominee, the issues that Elder is talking about that you'll hear in just a second are worth him being up there if for no other reason than to put those issues front and center. I am running as an America First MAGA Republican. Why then, Mr. Elder, are you running since we have a front runner who is a America First MAGA guy? Because there are so many issues that we should be talking about that our side does not talk about very much, if at all. Number one, the most serious domestic problem we face in America, by far, is the epidemic of fatherlessness. By far. 40% of kids today in America enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. That's up from around 8% in 1965. In fact, 70% of black kids today enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother, up from 25% in 1965. In fact, 25% of white kids now enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. What in the world has happened? And the answer is the welfare state, the war on poverty that a Democrat named Lyndon Johnson launched in 1965. And since then, we have incentivized women to marry the government and incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And you know what I'm talking about. And the numbers are clear. Even Barack Obama once cited them. A kid raised without a father is 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. It's an outrage that our side is not talking more about this. The other side doesn't talk about it because they caused it. Our side does not talk about it for fear of being accused of making a cultural determination and a fear of being accused of being racist. And if you're black, as moi am, you'll be accused by the LA Times of being, wait for it, the black face of white supremacy, as I was. It is the #1 social problem in America. For those of you who don't believe me, little word game for you. 60% of the homicides in this country are committed by black people, often against other black people. 60% of the robberies, 60% of the shootings, half of the homicide victims in America are black, almost all killed by other black people, contrary to what Joe Biden suggested when he claimed that white supremacy was the biggest problem facing the homeland. A young black man aged 10 to 43, according to the CDC, is 13 times more likely to be murdered than a young white man, same demo. Unless you're prepared to say black people are just genetically inclined to commit more crime, what the devil do you think is causing it? Then there is this lie that America remains systemically racist. Everybody knows at one time it was, but Democrats keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and claiming that America remains systemically racist. It's not only driving nonsense like reparations, which is the extraction of money from people who were never slave owners to be given to people who were never slaves. It is driving nonsense like race-based preferences, lowering standards so that you have a mismatch between applicant and college, so a greater percentage of the so-called affirmative action beneficiaries are flunking out than would otherwise be the case. It's also driving nonsense like diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is the opposite of what MLK wanted. He wanted a colorblind society, not a color-coordinated society. It's also getting people killed. How so? It's called the Ferguson effect or the George Floyd effect. That is the phenomenon of cops all over the country, in big city after big city, pulling back from their normal proactive policing, so crime has gone up. There are literally thousands of people who've been victimized by violent crime, many dead who otherwise wouldn't be dead if the police were doing their normal proactive policing. Even a Democrat mayor, Rahm Emanuel of Chicago, said that the police, after a high-profile shooting of a black person, had, quote, gone fetal, close quote. They weren't doing their job. And the overwhelming number of these excess casualties are the very black and brown people on the left purport to care about. It is getting people killed. Then you have this absolute disaster called K through 12 urban education. Here in Iowa, you guys have school choice, where the money follows the child. All too often in big city after big city after big city, that is not the case. Let me just give you two cities. Baltimore. I kid you not, there are 13 public high schools in Baltimore, all located in the inner city, where 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. I kid you not. Another half a dozen where only 1% can. All located in the inner city. That's half of all the public high schools in Chicago, all located in the inner city, where either 0% of the kids can do math at grade level, only 1% can. Outrageous. Chicago, 53 government schools in Chicago, 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. 0. Yet the Democratic Party opposes school choice because one of their largest funder, if not their largest funder, depending upon the election year, are the teachers union, and they adamantly oppose school choice. Even as studies show teachers put their own kids in private school. Nationwide, 10% of us have our kids in private school, 6% of black families do. A study some years ago found Philadelphia government school teachers, that's the term I prefer, government school, Philadelphia government school teachers with school-age kids, 49% of them put their own kids in private schools. Similar numbers in Chicago, similar numbers in Los Angeles. That's like having a restaurant, opening it up, putting up a big sign saying, come on in, eat the food. We sure won't. The people who know the school system the best aren't putting their own kids in it. What does that tell you? Then we have this debt standoff from time to time. We all know that neither party is going to be responsible for defaulting on the debt. So no matter what happens, the debt ceiling gets raised. We know that's going to happen. And at one time, every now and then, the government got shut down because of budget issues. No longer the case because the party that is perceived as responsible gets hurt in the polls. So government will not be shut down. The debt ceiling will be raised and raised and raised. Government got bigger under Ronald Reagan, my favorite president. It got bigger under George Herbert Walker Bush. It got bigger under W. It got bigger under Trump. It gets bigger because much of the government spending is on automatic pilot. Let me use a word, unsustainable. That's the word that Bill Clinton used to describe the so-called entitlements. Unsustainable. That's the word that Barack Obama used to describe the so-called entitlements. Why then does not anything get done? Why does the can get kicked down? Because with some exceptions, the number one goal of most politicians is to get elected. The number two goal is to get reelected. And you don't get elected promising to take things away from people, promising to reform the Social Security system and the other programs. You will not get elected. You will lose elections. The only way to make politicians reform these programs, the only way to make politicians truly reduce spending is with an amendment to the Constitution to fix spending to a certain percentage of the GDP. I would recommend 10%, which is half of what they're spending right now, with exceptions for war and for natural disaster. That way, when a politician and the others go into the lock room and come out, and the government is finally reduced to the size the founding fathers intended, they can say to the voters, please don't hurt me. The law made me do it. Otherwise, nothing will change. Absolutely nothing. Then we need to get rid of these soft on crime, George Soros-backed DAs. On my website, larryelder.com, I propose model legislation that states can adopt to set up commissions of retired judges and retired DAs so they hear citizens' complaints about all these people running around free who otherwise wouldn't be free if the DAs were doing their job. We need also an executive order to stop all this graft, whether you're the son or son-in-law of a president or vice president. I don't care whether it's Hunter Biden or whether it's Jared Kushner. It is wrong. We're going to stop that. Harry Truman said, if you go into politics broke, a la Joe Biden, and you come out rich, you're stealing. I feel the way I feel about my country. I love my country so much because of my mother and my father. My mother was born on a farm in Huntsville, Alabama, Jim Crow South, KKK era. My dad was born in Athens, Georgia, 50 years after the Civil War. My dad's mom was illiterate. My dad can't even tell you what his birthday is. He was born in the back of a room, and she couldn't even write down his birthday. He knows the year. Goes to kindergarten. The lady says, "What's your birthday?" My dad said, "I don't know." She wrote down May 25, which was her birthday. So every May 25, we tell my dad, you have a 1 in 365 chance of it being the right day. My dad's mom had a series of boyfriends, each one more irresponsible than the one before. Elder, my last name, is not the name of my dad's biological father. He never met him. Elder was an alcoholic who was abusive, who would beat up his mom. My dad tried to stop it. He'd beat him up. My dad is now 13 years old, comes home. Elder was long gone, and my dad starts quarreling with his mom's then boyfriend. She sides with the boyfriend, never to return. You're talking about an 8th grade dropout, black boy, Jim Crow South, at the beginning of the Great Depression. I defy you to find somebody who had a hand dealt like that. My dad said he walked down the dirt road. When you hear somebody say, so-and-so was dirt poor, my dad was dirt poor. He didn't have the first nickel for 2 nickels. He cleaned the barn. He ultimately got him a job as a Pullman porter on the trains. They were the largest private employer of blacks in those days. And my dad went all over the country, this 13-year-old black boy, and he went to this place called California, and a city called Los Angeles, where I was born. And my dad was blown away. You could walk through the front door of a restaurant and get served. My dad made a mental note, maybe someday I'll relocate to California, because he always had packages of crackers and tin cans of tuna, because in the South, you never knew whether you'd be able to get a meal. Pearl Harbor, my dad joins the Marines. We have any Marines here? I asked my dad why. He said 2 reasons. You know what I'm going to say? 1, they go where the action is. 2, I love the uniforms. My dad was in World War II, stationed on the island of Guam. He was a Montford Point Marine. They were the first black Marines. He was a staff sergeant in charge of cooking for the colored soldiers. My dad can look at a cake and tell you what's in it. He's that good. He gets out of the service, goes back to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where he met and married my mom, to get him a job as a cook. He walks around, pardon me for the kids who are here, and he was told, "We don't hire niggers." My dad goes to an unemployment office. The lady says, "You went through the wrong door." My dad goes to the hall, sees colored only, goes to that door, to the very same lady who sent him out. My dad came home to my mom and said, "I'm going to LA. I'm gonna get me a job as a cook. I'll send for you." Comes out to LA, he walks around and he's told, "You don't have any references." My dad said, "I need references to make ham and eggs?" He even offered to work for free for a reference. They wouldn't do that. Goes to an unemployment office, this time one door. Lady says, "I have nothing." My dad says, "What time do you open?" She says, 9 o'clock. "What time do you close?" She says, 5. My dad said, "I'll be sitting in that chair till you find something." My dad sat in the chair for a whole day, came back the next day. She calls him up. "I have something. I don't know whether you're going to want it." My dad said, "Of course I'm going to want it. I'm starting a family. What is it?" She said, "It's a job cleaning toilets and Nabisco brand bread." My dad did that for over 10 years, took a second full-time job cleaning toilets at another bread company, cooked for a family on the weekend because they wanted my mom to be a stay-at-home mom, as she was until the youngest of the 3 of us was in middle school. And he went to night school to get his GED. After getting his GED, he went to night school to learn how to operate a small restaurant. Age of 47, saves nickels and dimes, starts a small restaurant near downtown LA, which he runs until his 80s. And when my dad retired, he owned that property, the property next door, plus the home that's still in our family. Not too shabby for an 8th grade dropout. And my Republican dad used to have quarrels with my Democrat mom across the dinner table. You guys should have been there. But nobody called anybody a fascist. Nobody called anybody a Nazi. Nobody says you only care about the rich, you don't care about the poor. They argued and they debated civilly, but passionately. Why can't we do that? And my dad said this about Democrats. Democrats want to give you something for nothing. When you try and get something for nothing, you almost always end up getting nothing for something. And my dad told my brothers and me the following: hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. Larry, you cannot control the outcome, but you are 100% in control of the effort. And before you moan or groan about what somebody did to you or said to you, go to the nearest mirror, look at it, and say to yourself, how could I have done to change the outcome? And finally, my dad said this: no matter how hard you work, how good you are, sooner or later bad things are going to happen to you. How you deal with those bad things will tell your mother and me if we raised a man. I wrote a book about my 8-hour conversation with my father where he explained his whole life. It's called Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours. It's changed people's lives. I urge you to check it out. I've also written a book about my race for California, what I try to do. It's called As Goes California, My Mission to Rescue the Golden State and Save the Nation. As you can see, my goals are modest. I want to say one thing about my mom. She would not be happy if I left her out. My mom always told my brothers and me, no one can make you feel inferior without your permission. One day in high school, we study a course in African American literature. I say African American because that's the name of the course. I'm an American who is black. I don't use the term African American for myself. I'm just telling you what the name of the course was. Read a poem by a guy named County Cullen. It goes like this. While riding through old Baltimore, so small and full of glee, I saw a young Baltimorean keep a looking straight at me. Now, I was young and very small, and he was no whit bigger, and so I smiled. But he poked out his tongue and called me nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until September. Of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remember. Well, 95% of the school was black. Everybody in this class was black. Teacher was black. She was furious. The kids were furious. She talked about how this was going to permanently scar this boy's psyche. He'll always think of himself as a second-class citizen. He'll never be part of the American family. I walk home. I knew my mom was going to have a different take on it, but I didn't know what it was going to be. I walk into the house. She's in the kitchen, frying chicken wings, my favorite, and stirring a big pot of greens. I said, Mom, we read a poem in class. I want to get your reaction to it. She said, well, what is it? It goes like this. While riding through old Baltimore, so small and full of glee, I saw a young Baltimorean keep a looking straight at me. Now, I was young and very small, and he was no whit bigger, and so I smiled. But he poked out his tongue and called me nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until September. Of all things that happened there, that's all that I remember. My mom took the spoon out of the pot, hit it on the side, and said, Larry, what a darn shame he allowed something like that to ruin his vacation. How many wings do you want? I am running because my dad, as you know, was a World War II Marine vet. My older brother, Kirk, my late older brother, Kirk, served in the Navy during the Vietnam era. He was on the 6th Fleet in the Mediterranean. My little brother, Dennis, was in the Army. He went to Vietnam. I'm the only one who didn't serve. I've never felt good about that. The older I get, the worse I feel about it. This is my chance to give back to my country, and that is why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I love America. It's been great for me. It's been great for my family. It's been great for the world. And if I can do anything to move the debate in the area of the topics I mentioned, the lie that America remains systemically racist, the need for school choice, the absolute crisis of fatherlessness, the need for an amendment to fix the Constitution so that we can tie the budget to a certain percentage of the GDP, a way to get rid of these soft-on-crime George Soros DAs, and to do something about the graft and corruption by families of presidents and vice presidents. If I can do something to move the debate towards the center, then I have done my duty. Thank you so very much. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. LarryElder.com, $1.